And we are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Black and Blue. I got a special guest right here. I hope you guys are ready for him because I know I am. I'm excited for today's show. I can't wait to bring him up. I got Eric Basek here. Eric, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. Boy, that mic goes live and you were like, bam, right on with it.
Yeah, right on, and still stuttering, but still having a lot of fun doing it. Eric, I appreciate you making time to come on the show and engaging us in conversation. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm kind of a run-of-the-mill American first responder. I grew up in I guess you could say lower class, a working family for sure. My mom was a waitress. My dad worked for the state, and he was a first responder. Like, that's my number one childhood memory, is that even though we really didn't have much in the way of money and clothes, like, my parents still, my father especially, still devoted all of his free time to serving the community as a firefighter, police officer, and EMT. So that really put me on a track where I didn't have much of a choice but to wear a uniform of some sort. As I grew up, I became an EMT on a first aid squad and a police officer, and eventually a member of the military. And later in life, ended up pursuing entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship is mainly what I do now, and I maintain reserve service with the Coast Guard.
Gotcha. So it sounds like a lot, man. In my opinion, you sound like a real live G.I. Joe.
I like to tell people the Coast Guard is military adjacent. I love the Coast Guard. I think it's a great service. G.I. Joe adjacent, maybe.
Well, whatever you want to label it as. I mean, you're still in the first responder community and you're doing tremendous things. Hats off to you. Kudos.
Thank you. It feels good. It gives me purpose for sure.
Absolutely. And I know you got started at a young age, EMT and running with firefighter. What age did you actually get the spark, and why did you want to become a first responder? I know you already talked about your dad, but what gave you the spark?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people that live in cities don't realize that most of the country is supported by volunteers. You live in a city, you have a paid first responder, but where I grew up in Sussex County, New Jersey, if you got into a car accident in the middle of the day, and it was a really bad car accident, it was volunteer firefighters and volunteer EMTs who were showing up in an ambulance to take you to the hospital. And that means delayed service times and higher stress, higher risk, because the police officers are going to show up first, but they have minimal first aid experience. So you're really waiting for EMTs, paramedics, and firefighters. And so that's what I grew up doing. Starting on a first aid squad. My father was on the squad. And he had at the time, I think they still have, they're like beepers. And this beeper he'd wear all day. When it would go off, we knew there was an emergency. It was exciting and fun, even though first response is both exciting and horrible at the same time.
True.
It was exciting to see him run out the door and go and then come back and tell me, oh, this happened or that happened. It really seemed like a foregone conclusion that I was going to follow in his footsteps. There's no doubt that is the spark. And for me, it began at 15. At 15 years old, you were able to volunteer. And you were mostly a gopher. You were getting the oxygen. You were lifting the stretcher. You were doing things like that. And then at 16 is the earliest age you can become an EMT. I think within 2 months of my 16th birthday, I had passed the EMT test, and then I started serving. And it's so interesting in hindsight as an adult now in my 40s. At 16 years old, you don't need anybody else on a volunteer squad but the driver. So the driver could have no first aid experience. At 16, you could be certified as an EMT, and you could be called to somebody's house to deliver a baby.
Wow.
And I can't imagine being a 35-year-old woman delivering a baby, and this 16-year-old high school sophomore shows up, doesn't have his driver's license yet, and he's the guy there. And that was me. That was my early experience the first 5 years from 16 to 21. I was the guy showing up with anything that you can imagine for first aid service. And that's how it really got started for me.
Gotcha. That is pretty cool when you put it in perspective like that, to actually be a teenager without your driver's license. You're bringing life into this world. You're like, batter up.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I was thinking about this in preparation for today. Your experience as a professional first responder, it begins in synchronization with trauma. So the trauma that you experience begins the very first day. And so you mentioned bringing life into the world. What a joy. The greatest thing in the world is delivering babies. It's so cool, right? But I remember the first time I did CPR, I also did not have a driver's license. And I was 16. I remember the house. I remember the location. I remember doing it with my father. My father and I were rotating between compressions and resuscitate with the breath. And it was an elderly gentleman. It was somebody's grandfather because the grandkids were there, and somebody's father because the daughter was there. But at 16, I'm both bringing life into the world and also trying to keep it in the world, and
Yeah.
ultimately most of the time failing.
Yeah.
And so it's like that professional training begins in cadence with the trauma that begins. It's an interesting journey for sure, a difficult one.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of things that are tremendously true. Being a first responder is exciting, but it comes with tons of trauma. The younger you are, the more you may not know how to process it, or you actually want to accept it because you want to be encultured in the environment. But then after a while, it just weighs heavy on you. One thing that resonates with me, there's something that you said, a lot of things with trauma and trauma dumping or with PTSD or anything like that, you like to actually focus on working out that kind of alleviate some of the trauma, the mental drain, the dump. I know you can explain it better, but I'm processing as I'm talking about it.
This is a lifetime. I'm only in my 40s, but a lifetime of experience has brought me to the realization that healing from trauma requires three really important things: people, purpose, and fitness. And its importance is in that order, but the application is in the reverse order. Right? It's extremely difficult to find really good people. It just is. And when I mean really good, I mean people that you call to celebrate wins with and that you call to talk about losses. Honestly, the win thing is sometimes harder because, let's say for me as an entrepreneur, I'm making more money I've ever made in my entire life. Who do I celebrate that with without them feeling like there's a competition or jealousy or what that's really hard. Sometimes people are actually happy to hear about your trauma because it brings you down to their level. So finding good people is very difficult. And that's why it's the most impactful. On the opposite end of the spectrum, fitness is incredibly impactful, but also incredibly easy to do because if fitness isn't, it's not like go to Venice Gold's Gym on the beach and like be Arnold. Like that's obviously my dream, but going out, grabbing a rucksack, putting it on your back, and walking for 3 miles. That's something you can do in solitude by yourself, and it will have an immediate and biologically measurable change in your mood. So those three things to me, people, purpose, and fitness, are critical that I've discovered both through my own experience and anecdotally working with veterans, primarily veterans, for dealing with trauma, healing and dealing.
Right. And I promise you folks, we did not have this conversation. Those of you that follow the show, I call myself King 360 because I bought a 60-pound weight vest. I have a 3-mile trail where I throw it on. I've got the headphones on. I'm either listening to a podcast or listening to music. And I'm telling you, the 3 miles with 60 pounds, it is a game changer. I mean, you feel like you accomplished something at the end of it. The endorphins are really going crazy. You instantly see and feel the effects because you're going to feel the effects, especially the next day. But you really feel like you accomplished something. I totally get it. It is a literal breath of fresh air.
Yeah, and you can do it at any moment, at any time of day, pitch black, during the day, by yourself. It doesn't require anything but the motivation, which is often the difficult part, to just get out of your chair.
Right. So when you first became a police officer, what are some experiences that you may have had that shaped you into a position that you're in right now?
I would say it's a continuum. It really began as an EMT. It really began. And especially for me, I was a 9/11 responder. So everybody, you get that question, where were you when 9/11 happened? I was at ground zero. I was there the night the towers fell, maybe 8 o'clock at night, only hours after the towers fell. That for sure shaped my outlook on first response and the world. It's such a shame that it takes trauma to get people to step up, but first responders, they're waiting for the trauma. They don't need the trauma to step up. They're ready to go. I'll never forget walking in between the buildings that were still standing. Many of them, like a couple of the towers, they ended up bringing down because they were so badly damaged. And I remember turning a corner in between the buildings, and I saw, like, I don't know, in my mind, it was like 100 folding chairs. And in the folding chairs were police officers, firefighters, and first responders sleeping uncomfortably in these chairs, just exhausted from work. And I just never forget the feeling of, I really want to be a part of this. These people, I had no doubt that if they had to, they would have stayed there and slept in that chair until the job was done. That experience in particular shaped what I felt about this calling for first response. A lot of people, when they retire, say, I miss the clowns, not the circus. And veterans will say, I didn't fight for the cause. You fight for your country, but it's like I fought for the guy or the girl to my left or to my right. And it's that bond that you have with your peers that is unlike anything else that I think civilians could experience.
Thank you for sharing that as well. I bet that's a tough memory that they'll go through, but the camaraderie that you get from the suffrage of going your battle buddy next to you, whether you're military, law enforcement, firefighter, whatever first responder job that you're in, when you go through that trauma that you're running toward, not running away from, and you're doing it because the guy or gal next to you, they're running the same direction, you feel obligated that you still have the fear, you overcome the fear with the courage, and you're still able to perform and do what's necessary. Even in the middle of all this chaos, you're there to stick it out until the storm is over. It's a weird feeling. It's a weird process. It's a weird dynamic to understand, but it's a first responder thing.
There's so many things to unpack because we live for it. We love it. At the same time, you have all this trauma. And I think in law enforcement in particular, we tend to pretend that it doesn't bother us. I think we've gotten so much better with veterans with dealing publicly and speaking out loud about trauma. But I still think we're stuck 100 years ago with police officers. We just bury it deep down inside and never bring it up again, right? And we tend to do that. And the feeling of camaraderie, the bonding that we have with the people around us, not only do we experience the trauma of a career, but when we retire, we experience a great trauma of loss.
Yeah.
Because we lose that connection to our coworkers. I don't blame anybody. I just think humans, what we prioritize is our family and our household. But it's like when somebody retires, it's 6 months, 9 months, and the phone stops ringing. Your coworkers stop calling you to check in on you. You stop hanging out with them. I don't blame them. We all have so much in our lives to focus on. It's hard to create a spreadsheet of all of your retired friends and be like, I got to check in with Eric, see how he's doing. It's been 9 months. We just don't do that. And so that thing that we spend a whole lifetime loving and dealing with is suddenly gone. And even if you've never been blown up, you've never had something really traumatic where people like, it's obvious, oh, this guy probably has PTSD, who's blown up. You could have gone 25 years, never been injured in law enforcement, and then you leave. And the greatest trauma of all is the actual loss of the uniform and of the identity.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult.
Yeah, very much so. Speaking, we are in fashion with 9/11, and we're in the month of September now. A lot of individuals that were on the job like yourself during the actual day, the day in question, ground zero, and the day it happened also, I know there were a lot of younger kids, I would say, that were motivated to become first responders because of the incident, wanting to help and have purpose. Now we're 25 years later, and some of the individuals who were first responders have already retired out. And now the ones that became first responders around that time are getting ready to retire or have already. We're still in that phase where they're retiring or coming up to the wall of it. Speaking with vets, first responders, law enforcement, it's hard to unpack all those years that you kept that suppressed and now coming out. And then that's when I had a few guests on the show that had the nightmares after they retired. They can't sleep. They get into bad habits. They don't know what to do with themselves. Before you had purpose, you had the camaraderie with those that you work with. And now it's all of a sudden gone. The job still continues on. Therefore, you feel alienated and they don't know how to unpack that because they aren't a part of the culture per se anymore. What would you say let me put it this way. Have you spoke to anyone that has gone through those issues or nightmares, or what would you say to that person right there or soon to be right there?
Yeah, virtually everybody I know that loved the job and took it seriously because, obviously not everybody does. No, it's not a job of perfect people. The majority of people that got into it for the right reasons and spent a whole career doing it, they all struggle with the retirement. In my experience, they all struggle with it. And I find the people that deal with it the best, it's that people, purpose, and fitness, right? So they tend to be physically active, which biologically releases endorphins and does all this stuff inside that you can't see. And what does that lead to? It leads to you looking better, feeling better. And then when you look better, you feel better, you carry yourself better. And because of that, you can meet people and interact with people. Purpose is that next most important thing because you've lost it. And so now you have to find it again. And if you don't find it again, the fitness will only get you so far. First, you're doing the fitness because it feels good and you're doing it for you. But then it's like, why am I doing this? I find the people that already have that second career in mind or that second activity in mind, or that they have the plan for what, if I ask a guy, what are you going to do when you retire? And he's like, I have no idea. I'm worried about that person.
Yeah.
What are you going to do once you retire? For people that are already physically fit or engaging in fitness, that's got to be number one at their list for what to do. I joined the Coast Guard because I left law enforcement and I missed wearing a uniform so much. I missed serving. And if the Coast Guard didn't have a program for me, I joined at 37. I went to boot camp at 37. I went to OCS at 41. If I didn't have that, I'd be a firefighter, EMT, or paramedic.
Right.
Because I have not yet figured out what to do when that chapter is totally closed. And to be totally honest, it scares me. I have a business. It does very well. If I have to hang up the Coast Guard uniform, I feel like I have no other choice but to find a way to serve, because I have not yet figured out how to live without serving.
Right.
I think that is the critical necessity for people near the age of retirement, to figure out what you're going to do afterwards, because it was such a big part of your life. You might tell people, I don't need to serve anymore, but I don't know if I believe it.
Exactly. I know. And that goes to my next point as well. Thank you for explaining that. Thank you for being real and raw. You can see the emotion coming through in the way that you explain that. And it's very true. Law enforcement officers, especially around COVID in the year 2020, you saw the quiet quitting, those that could retire, close to retire, or could retire, had mass exodus. There are a lot of good officers, a lot of experienced officers, or first responders for that point, have left, and because of the culture and because of the narrative perceived nationally. Have you ever been on the job where the level of burnout was so overwhelming that you didn't know your next move, if you should let it go and try something else, or continue on and watch things get befuddled, where the slippery slope of negativity takes you downhill?
Yeah, unfortunately, a number of times. In DC, we handled protests a lot. I worked for an agency that has gotten a lot of press lately from Trump, but we handled all the protests in DC, and that was really difficult. I hated them because you were labeled, whatever the cause was, you were the enemy. So if the cause was like we're protesting war in Iraq, you were a baby killer. If it was women's rights, you were a sexist. If it was whatever it was, you standing on the line represented what they were protesting against. I don't care what people say. Like, oh, ignore the comments, whatever. That's virtually impossible. I'm not that guy. I think many first responders get into law enforcement because they're empathetic. So when somebody attacks you personally, you're not stone-faced. Protests for me were always extremely difficult. The second most difficult thing for me is the culture of law enforcement. If you can find a great agency, never leave them, for no matter what money, no matter what, because you definitely have toxic culture in law enforcement, and it is pervasive. When I left law enforcement, I started to get into teaching, and I taught defensive tactics all over the country. I've been to most states, worked with all sorts of agencies, big, little. And what was cool about that is what I discovered is police officers are the same in every state. My guess is if I were to go international, it'd be the same every country of the world.
Wow.
I felt like they were all the same. You have a group of people that just want to serve. At the same time, for many agencies, you also have a group of people that are in it for themselves. They're in it for the promotion, the rank, the authority, and it can create a very toxic environment. Unfortunately, I was part of a toxic environment near the end of my career. It's pretty much why I left. In hindsight, I think I would have handled it a lot different. I think I would have just been tried to have been the quiet stoic until it passed, because it did eventually pass in that department. But it was really hard on me. My wife had a miscarriage. She blamed the job. It was a combination of all of that toxic. It wasn't the trauma from serving people. It was the trauma from working with toxic administrators that brought me to one of the lowest points of my life.
I'm sorry to hear all that. Trust me, I get it. I know. Interviewing a lot of first responders on here, I agree with you 100%. No matter who's on here, it seems like first responders at some point are all the same. Those are the same driving factors of negativity that everyone says, that the culture itself within the department or within the agency, that's the reason why most of them leave or are fed up with the job and just get pissy with it. And it's a shame to be that way because, again, we all get in here to serve and want to leave the place, the department, the township, neighborhood, city, the world a better place than before we got there. And that's our usually most responders' mental goal.
Yeah. And there was no Jocko in 2012. He was in Iraq, I think. I didn't have the book Extreme Ownership. I wasn't reading at that time. I was so young, in my mid-20s. I wasn't reading leadership books. I wasn't reading John Maxwell or Jim Rohn or Tony Robbins. And if I could give advice to my younger self or anybody in the early stages of the career, seek personal growth on your own without direction from other people. Those tools that Jocko gives you in books like Extreme Ownership and John Maxwell gives you in his leadership books help you handle those situations because they exist in every career field. You just have the added trauma of the actual job itself in law enforcement, in the military. Equip yourself with the mental skills, the psychological skills to deal with a shitty boss when you have one, right? Because you're going to have them in all sorts of jobs. Yeah. I didn't have those skills and I wasn't acquiring them at the time. Since then, I have been working very hard to acquire them so I can be more flexible when life demands.
Speaking of self-discipline and being self-taught, I know that you've done many different disciplines, work for agencies, whether federal, local, military. And not only that, you were just discussing writing a book. And one of the lessons in cadence, you see it scrolling below. This is very important, especially for newer, younger officers, because it talks about the trauma and how to move on from it. Is there anything that resonated with you, especially for lessons in cadence, that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I would actually say it's the through line of every story. If you watch a movie like a romantic comedy, right? A romantic comedy is what? Boy meets girl, boy's an idiot, girl is stubborn, maybe she's dating somebody else, something's keeping them apart, funny stuff happens throughout the whole movie, they end up together.
Right.
Every romantic comedy, essentially the same. I found that interviewing those police officers and veterans, that trauma is the same. The details are different. Somebody is sexually assaulted or raped when they're younger. Somebody gets into a shooting. Somebody is shot. Somebody is blown up. Bobby Summers speaks in the book about holding his friend as his friend dies in his arms. During COVID, I had Zoom calls with these guys. I had 2-3 hour Zoom calls multiple times and captured their stories. And then I wrote it into the book. Bobby is crying his eyes out, telling me how he's holding his buddy. He literally said, I tried plugging all the holes, but he had more holes in him than I had fingers. And I'm imagining him trying to stop the bleeding. And, the guy passes in his arms. The details of the trauma are different. What trauma does to you, in my very unprofessional experience, I'm not a psychologist or a doctor, but I feel like what it does to you is the same. When I interviewed 5 veterans, 4 police officers, men and women, all a whole bunch of different trauma, what I discovered was that the effect on you is essentially the same. There's some version of guilt, whether survivor's guilt or I should have done this better or what if I did this different, is all that like looking back. Then there's the feeling of aloneness, like nobody knows what I'm thinking. I remember speaking to one female who got into a shooting in New Jersey. And she was like, randomly, I would just smell gunpowder and it would scare the hell out of me. And when she got into a group of other officers that had been in shootings, they were like, oh yeah, we experienced the same thing. Those responses, what I found is they're basically the same for everybody. And we feel alone. What I was hoping was that the book would reveal common threads so that if you read a chapter, let's say you're a veteran and you picked a veteran chapter and you read it, you might be like, oh, I feel exactly the same way. I know that this guy, I had a veteran who lost his leg in a motorcycle accident and wasn't overseas. It's like, if you lost your leg in combat, you're still going to have these shared threads of biological and mental responses to that trauma. And hopefully the shared threads of recovery, the things that they had to do across all 9 stories in order to recalibrate, take their compass of their life and repoint it towards a better direction. It's never always going to be perfect. The things that they all had to do were very similar. The hope is that if somebody was struggling and they read a chapter, the first feeling that they would have is, oh, I'm not alone. Somebody else has been through this. And maybe there are some things in their story that I can do, like taking up fitness, finding good people in your life, discovering new purpose. I can do those things, and maybe I will start the healing process. And that was kind of the goal of the book. And the realization I had when it was kind of finished was that we're all the same. We all want the same things, and nothing that's happened to you hasn't happened to somebody else. And that's not to say that you're not special. What it is to say is that you can recover and you can take steps forward. We just had a member of my unit commit suicide.
I'm sorry.
I mean, like a couple of months ago.
Yeah. Wow.
Just happened.
Yeah.
17 years in the Coast Guard and a police officer in Bradenton, Florida. And he was struggling. And, for whatever reason, he didn't get enough help or didn't tell enough people. And maybe he didn't feel like he could.
Right.
And it's such a shame, because that reaching out is, you can't force somebody to reach out, but that's the first step, and it's the most important step. And I think the blocker is people think they're alone.
Yeah.
And they're not. That's out. If somebody was watching this and they felt alone, you're not alone. Somebody else feels what you're feeling. The same way you bond in law enforcement and in military, you can also bond with that trauma when you've had something really terrible happen to you and you're really, really struggling.
Right.
And that was the biggest impact by far of all those stories.
Thank you for sharing that. I like how you explained that through the threads of suffering and silence. We, as first responders, do it all the time. I'm guilty of it myself. We're the helpers. I don't need help until it's already too late. I'm speaking as me and also the first responder community. I know we're doing a better job of it now. It's being addressed now, but it's just get over it and drive on and go to the next call or get to the next mission, whatever it may be. And it's such a shame, because once you realize you do unpack or you do reach out, there are similar stories. I've gone through peer training, and not to throw anybody out there, but as the younger officer that it discloses something that's going on, I'm like, wow, I remember I went through something similar about 10 years ago. Thank you for telling me that. Now I can share my experience with you and how I got through it. Yes, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and to see their eyes go, really? I'm like, yeah, really? I never knew that about you. I'm like, well, I don't always say this, but yes, I experienced this, and this is how I got through it. And you'll get through it as well, and you'll be better because of it, and at the outcome of it as well.
We need to be more transparent, and we need to be more authentic. We just had this member commit suicide. And what happens? It's like you get an email. It's like, hey, if anybody's feeling lonely, reach out. And I don't mean to denigrate it, but it's so administratively a response. Here's a pamphlet. Here's an email. You'll read the first 2 sentences and then go, I'm not reading the rest of this.
Yeah.
It feels very much like CYA. And I'm not saying that that's what it is. It's just how it feels. And I would say that what we really need to do to be better at this is to bring in more people and share more real stories. If I were running a unit, I'd be looking for a speaker to come in and speak at my all hands meeting, or I would share a podcast or a book. I would try and do something more real and more authentic than sending out the Coast Guard's latest policy on suicide prevention. You know what I mean? I know you mean well, but to have somebody stand in front of you, Bobby vividly describes attempting to commit suicide, the thought process and what he was going to do. To hear that story, and then to hear where he is today with his business and his family, that's the story that impacts people far more than the memo that gives you the 1-800 number. Not that you don't need the number. If I could do more positive change, it would be those real stories.
Right.
The person willing to be authentic, honest, transparent, and vulnerable, which is something police officers and first responders don't want to be. So when you find that guy or girl, put them in front of people and let them speak.
I agree with you. And you're sharing your stories here now, and I guarantee you're touching someone that is going through something right now, or maybe going through something. And I appreciate the fact that you're willing to open up and share your experiences. And I know physical fitness is what you pride yourself on, getting through endorphins, the struggle of weights or whatever it may be, actually gets you to perform, to get to your purpose. And you did that as well by opening your own gym, correct?
I did. That was the first business that I started when I left law enforcement. Opened up a gym, had a thin blue line around the wall of the whole gym. We started our own charity, my wife and I, with a couple of veterans and police officers. Fitness has been the focal point of the charity. I think it's the easiest and the first step that people can take towards healing, for sure.
With opening a gym and going back into the Coast Guard and still serving, what other adventures are you a part of? I see you have your Finanthem shirt on. I hope I said that correctly, but explain that. Give us a update on what's going on now.
It's fan of them. So
sorry.
It's like a play on the words. I'm a fan of them. We work with YouTubers. We partner with them. We do giveaways and sweepstakes. I think our unique selling prop, the unique thing about our company is we give essentially half of the revenue that we make to our YouTube partners, allowing them to live a life, because YouTube doesn't offer 401k and a health plan, and they don't offer days off, and it's quite difficult. And we all love YouTube. Anytime something in your house breaks, you go to YouTube to find out how to fix it.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of unique about our company. We give about half of our revenue to our partners to help them continue building their channels.
Gotcha. And I apologize on mispronouncing that. Fan of them. I love it.
Yeah, it's been really good for us.
Nice. So in closure, we have had a great interview, Eric, and I appreciate you again coming on the show and being vulnerable and explaining your experiences and situations with first responders and experiences through others that you've shared as well. But I may have forgot to ask a question, or I may have jogged your memory on something that you would like to touch on. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us right now? The floor is yours.
One of the questions you said you might ask is about the charity, and if there was something particularly impactful. That there's one thing, and I thought about it when I was talking about what would you do for suicide prevention. I would bring somebody up and have them speak. A program we started in New Jersey that I would love to restart in Florida is we worked with the Marine Corps recruiting office. The Marines have this poolee program. You're a high school senior and you sign up in January and you're going to ship in August. Between January and August, you go in a poolee program, and the Marine Corps meets once a month, and they start the camaraderie building right then and there. You all wear the Marine Corps shirt and you do PT, and there's like the whole atmosphere. They really try to prep the kids for boot camp better than I've seen any other branch. And my favorite thing to do with my charity was we would bring in 2 or 3 veterans or police officers with life experience. We would fly them into New Jersey and host a 3 or 4 hour session, which was essentially like a 4-hour session, but it was 4 hours, 3-4 hours of PT, of running, of team building games. We take them to a lake in the winter and have them do flutter kicks in the freezing cold lake. A lot of that fun military boot camp stuff that you hate in boot camp, but you love when you leave boot camp. And I just think that was such a great program. I would love to see that expanded with other military branches and restarted here in Florida. It gave veterans and police officers who were retired or who had left, who really missed that connection. It allowed them to stay connected, not only to the military, but to the future of the military. So the future leaders, the next generation, it allowed them to be a mentor, to speak of their stories. The feedback that I got from the mostly children, they're mostly 16 and 17-year-old kids. You had your occasional older 20-something that would sign up for the Marines, but mostly high school kids. The feedback was better than I could have imagined, because it was an opportunity for them to learn from, a couple of these guys are amputees that served in combat. And it was an opportunity for them to see, feel, touch, hear somebody that is where they want and had done what they want to do. I feel it was such a great program, and I would love to start that back up again in Florida. I've moved to Florida from New Jersey, and I'd love to get other branches involved because it was free. The feedback from both the cadre and the recruiters who participated and from the recruits was really impactful. Maybe the most fun thing that I've done and the thing I'm most proud of, for sure.
Gotcha. I love that. It's the give and take. You've got the retired guy coming back in, sharing experiences to rejolt that experience, and still blessing the up and comers. They get to feed off of each other. It's a nexus right there. Both are absorbing each other's energy, and the retired guys get to feel the camaraderie again. The new guys get to see what it's like, learn the experience, find mentors, ask about the life, ask about trainings. It sounds interesting. So if anyone was out there that wanted to watch that program come to fruition, what would you tell them to start it up or get in contact with you or help out the charity itself?
Our charity is Stay Safe. Stay safe is something police officers say to each other, when they pass each other, hey, like, stay safe, you got it's a dangerous job. And so that's where the name comes from. And you go to the website and contact me, and anywhere in the country, we'll go anywhere in the country. I have veterans and police officers waiting for the next event. Unfortunately, with recruiters, they do a 3 or 4 year cycle and then they're out. And it's got to be up to the next guy to continue the program. And I'm waiting for that recruiter that wants this program again. My dream, if I could sell fan of them at some point and have the money, I would love to start this all over the country and really be a place where kids that want to serve can get to start serving on the right foot, get that experience early.
I love it. So I'm going to make sure that this is going to be posted in the description. It'll be in the comment section as well. And the website will be there for both description comments or the label. That's what I'm trying to say. And I'll have it scrolling as well. Therefore, there's no reason why you can't reach out and do your part of the first responder community, whether you're retired or rookie. There's experiences that need to be had. Thank you. Thank you for that, Charity. Thank you for everything and coming on the show, Eric. I truly appreciate it.
No, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, make sure you check out the book. Make sure you check out his websites. Make sure you look into him on social media platforms and the people that he highlights and the businesses and pages that he highlights as well, because it is necessary. And we're just humanizing the badge and moving the needle forward. Thank you all for tuning in. You guys have a good one.